Well, I think, we've been looking for him now for about 15 or 20 minutes, but
Okay.
I thought it could be 5, it could be longer, because he was just playing around here, we heard him, and then we heard nothing.
Spider-Man suit helps your scenario too, doesn't it? Because it's very easy for a stranger to say...
Mr. Jones, we're investigating the disappearance of young William Tyrrell. Do you know anything about that? Where were you on the day William Tyrrell disappeared? Mr. Jones, do you know anything about that?
Inspector Jubilant now has a theory as to what happened to William in those short, terrifying minutes 1 year ago. He discounts the idea an abductor ran up the yard and onto the property to take the little boy.
I expect the evidence may show it is likely that he was taken. That is, that William's disappearance was the direct result of human intervention.
11 years have passed since William Tyrrell vanished from that quiet backyard in Kendall, and what's truly baffling is how, after all this time, there's still no unified conclusion, just a web of theories pulling in every direction. While criticism rains down on the foster parents for their handling of the day, a lot of folks cling to a simpler yet far riskier idea for William abduction, not by some lone wolf, but potentially tied to a PD network lurking in those tangled local circles. We dig into how multiple suspects emerge here, from repairmen with shaky alibis to social groups riddled with offenders, painting a picture where a quick snatch could link to something organized and dark. But here's the question that keeps us up: if abduction holds, who orchestrated it, and what shadows hid William all these years? And with so many negative theories swirling, cover-ups, falls, or rings, can we even guarantee William's safety anymore, especially after 11 relentless years? Is William Tyrrell still alive? First of all, we dive right into the core question hanging over this case, that is William Tyrrell dead or alive? For the most widely believed hypothesis, the accident and cover-up hypothesis, the police from Strike Force Roseanne and the ongoing inquest have zeroed in on the theory that William died from a fall off the balcony at his grandmother's house right around 10:04 a.m. on September 12, 2014.
New developments in the search for William Tyrrell this morning. A car that once belonged to his foster grandmother has been seized in Sydney and taken to a secure facility for forensic examination. Police worked through the night searching his foster grandmother's property in Kendall, where the little boy was last seen alive. Detectives used a chemical called luminol to test for any blood. The investigation is now focused on one person of interest, his foster mother. Joining me.
This idea rests on the complete absence of any traces showing he wandered away. No tiny footprints leading off the property, no sign of blood anywhere nearby, and the fact that cadaver dogs couldn't pick up his scent heading into the bush or beyond the yard. They ran experiments simulating how a remains would decompose quickly in Kendall's damp, forested terrain, showing that Williams could have broken down and vanished from detection within a short period, especially if buried shallow or exposed to the elements. Cell phone data from the foster grandmother's Mazda showed irregular pings heading toward Batar Creek Road that same day, which investigators suspect was used to transport the remains after the fall. The foster mother comes under heavy suspicion for covering it up, driven by her fear of losing custody amid her documented history of strict discipline. She'd been accused of slapping William before, and the potential scrutiny from child welfare checks. Massive searches in 2020 and 2021 turned up nothing, neither William's remains nor his distinctive Spider-Man outfit, which bolsters the case for an internal accident or even homicide handled quietly within the family circle. During the inquest in November 2024, the foster mother broke down in tears denying she dumped the remains, but police laid out their suspicions of an on-site death, sticking to that narrative. Even former Detective Gary Jubilant, who once leaned toward abduction, has seen the inquest shift hard to this angle, and the foster father's conviction getting quashed in October 2025 didn't sway the core direction. On the flip side, the lack of remains or any confirming DNA after 11 years keeps the door cracked for him being alive, especially with that razor-thin window, just minutes before anyone noticed he was gone, suggesting someone could have snatched and spirited him away without a trace. Reports of unfamiliar vehicles parked close by that morning, like the white station wagon and gray sedan, linger as potential getaway cars, alongside accounts of screams echoing from the scrub nearby. A fresh claim surfaced in June 2025 from a second witness pointing to a person of interest who allegedly took that little boy some 250 kilometers from Kendall, adding fuel to the idea of a swift relocation. Psychics chimed in during 2025, one publicly declaring, "William's visions, while Jubilant himself stressed in September 2024 that there's no evidence deceased, citing real stories of kids recovered alive decades after abductions. Then came the October 2025 lead on a Spider-Man suit discovered on a beach in Dunbogan, only 20 minutes drive from Kendall, sparking initial buzz that it might connect back to William's outfit, though police quickly ruled it out as unrelated. William's biological mother has long suspected a ring orchestrated the grab, arguing the eye-catching costume would help if he were kept alive somewhere. The inquest from 2024 to 2025 still nods to abduction as a remote possibility, even if faint, noting he'd be 14 by June 2025 if surviving. As for whether investigators and search teams still chase this alive hope, it's no longer the main thrust. Police tilt heavily toward death, with the inquest pushing back dates in December 2024 to drill down on the accident theory. The $1 million reward hangs open, but large-scale hunts wrapped after 2021. And while Jubilant pushes for more abduction probes, Strikes misses it for scant physical proof. The foster mother demands police produce evidence against their death stance, but the fresh inquest rounds prioritize cover-up over any alive scenarios, sidelining those leads as they fizzle without hard ties. This splits the theories into clear forks, starting with the internal death branch where he tumbles from the balcony, and the foster family scrambles to hide the remains, the foster mother allegedly driving off to dispose of them, motivated by clinging to custody amid looming welfare probes, which gains traction from the 2024 inquest's crime commission tapes and that erratic vehicle data. It branches further into homicide if discipline escalated beyond accident, like an unintended smack during a routine correction gone wrong. Over in the alive or abduction lane, opportunistic grabs by a lone stranger or a PD network exploit those suspicious cars for a quick snatch, leaning on the initial void of evidence and no signs of struggle, though it crumbles under cadaver dogs failing to track and zero sightings post-2014. A sub-path plots premeditated stalking of the foster setup beforehand. The natural disappearance arm, William toddling off to parish logs or taken by wildlife, gets nixed early since dogs caught no whiff deep in the scrub. The big divide pits police, locked on death and cover up with their methodical builds, against community voices and podcasts clinging to alive odds purely because no remains surfaced, sparking backlash over the inquest drag and Jubilant's alleged leaks in muddy waters. Of course we won't stop here, let's dig deeper into these theories. The abduction. The abduction theory stood out as the primary angle for New South Wales police from the outset, framing William's swift disappearance from the foster grandmother's yard in Kendall that morning of September 12, 2014, as clear human intervention rather than a toddler simply wandering off. We see how detectives locked onto this narrative early, pushing the idea that someone external stepped in and took control, turning a routine playtime into something deliberate and sinister. Detective Inspector Gary Jubilant, stepping in to lead Task Force Rosan at the start of 2015, drilled down on the offender likely being right in the vicinity, gaining a crucial head start before anyone raised the alarm. He painted the scenario as an opportunistic grab by a stranger who capitalized on the moment William wandered toward the edge of the road, perhaps waiting for his dad to pull up rather than storming the yard itself, which would have been too exposed and risky on that dead-end street. Jubilant took hands-on steps to retrace William's final movements, piecing together how the boy might have headed down the slope near the house, with the mother catching that last roar from the game they were playing, while ruling out any far wander into the thick, steep bush that would terrify a 3-year-old. He ramped up public involvement by urging reports on any Spider-Man suit sightings, fielding over 4-7 leads that kept the team chasing potential matches, even if they turned out false. Jubilant's take highlighted how abduction stood out as rare for a kid William's age, noting that PD types typically went after older children, but he didn't dismiss it outright, suggesting it could fit if a childless couple or someone with those impulses spotted the boy and built quick rapport through the Spider-Man suit, maybe calling out, "He's Spider-Man," to lure him in. He described it as evil colliding with innocence, with William desperately thinking his mum or dad would swoop in any second, which tore at the heart of the investigation's drive. We track Senior Constable Chris Rowley, the first responder just 4 kilometers away, rushing to Benaroon Drive after the 000 call came in around 15 to 20 minutes post-disappearance, guiding the family back inside to calm the house thoroughly in case William hid somewhere simple. Rowley reassured the dad with a shoulder touch and promises of a bigger search ramping up the next day, treating it initially as a search and a push to locate the boy alive. Then Detective Vanessa Partridge, the first on-scene investigator and a local mother herself, picked up an immediate gut feeling that something deeper was off. Bigger than a standard wander, convinced that if he had just gone missing in the usual way, they would have turned him up by then, which steered her toward advocating human intervention from the jump. The abduction-focused process kicked off with Strike Force Rosen forming on September 16, 2014, assembling 14 full-time detectives and analysts to sift through hundreds of public tips pouring in, while planning interviews for everyone within a 1-kilometer radius active between 10 and 11 a.m. that day. By 2015, the homicide squad took over, reclassifying it as a straight criminal matter, ditching any little boy lost framing for undeniable human action, which meant flagging anyone who hadn't come forward yet as potentially suspicious and warranting deeper scrutiny. Jubilant built out the command center operations, generating over 5,000 documents and more than 400 information reports from public sources, conducting excess of 1,000 interviews, and executing undisclosed search warrants to chase leads without tipping hands. He kept family involvement off the table initially but ruled it out early after checks, waking each day convinced this could be the breakthrough moment, jumping at every phone ring as a possible lead, and maintaining regular contact with the parents to keep hope anchored. The inquest launched in 2019 to unpack Strike Force findings, underscoring the disappearance as human-driven, with projections that evidence would point to William being taken rather than falling into a drain or chasing off after a wallaby in the bush. Searches scaled up massively in 2020 and 2021, still under the abduction framework, deploying resources to cover potential escape routes. But by November 2021, new intelligence prompted a pivot toward hunting for William's remains, signaling cracks in the original direction. The inquest dragged into 2024-2025 with fresh hearings, where police pressed the Director of Public Prosecutions to pause any charge considerations until the full coronial review wrapped. Jubilant, as the key expert voice, admitted discomfort after just 12 months without resolution, vowing to exhaust every humanly possible avenue, refusing to quit, and keeping an open mind to all possibilities despite the goosebumps from false alarm sightings that teased real progress. We note how he reflected on the irony of thoroughness in probing every angle, targeting folks until eliminated, following lines of inquiry straight to the coroner without zeroing in on one wrong path specifically, but acknowledging the general scrutiny everyone faced. Issues cropped up in the handling, starting with delays in going public with key details, like holding back vehicle specifics for a full 12 months after the disappearance, framed as strategy but ultimately stifling fresh tips and leaving the public in the dark too long. The standout problem boiled down to a lack of specific and consistent investigative direction, with the probe hyper-focused exclusively on abduction for those first 7 years from 2014 to 2021, breeding false hope in the community that a living rescue was imminent, only for the abrupt 2021 switch to accident and cover-up theories to fracture trust between police and public, sparking backlash over the inquest's endless drag and whispers of leaks undermining the process. A major flaw hit right at the start, skipping a full criminal probe launch in favor of that initial, little boy lost search mode, which postponed critical forensics in those golden hours, a misstep later echoed as a hard lesson in cases like Gus Lamont in 2025 where protocols tightened up. Jubilant came aboard in 2015 amid heavy public fixation on abduction, but delays in verifying alibis stretched months, causing witnesses to blur school assemblies together since dozens had passed. A general nod that early clarification would benefit all but no outright judgment on what prior teams had in hand. Internal shakeups threw more wrenches in, like Jubilant's sensational removal before 2019 over secretly recording a person of interest without a warrant, leading him to quit the force and plead not guilty to charges tied directly to his William duties, insisting on operational need to capture those conversations without any cover-up attempts. The inquest faced heat for its sluggish tempo, with dates vacated in December 2024 to refocus on the accident theory, which eroded consistency in chasing the abduction thread and created a stop-start rhythm that sapped overall cohesion. Community discussions on Reddit and podcasts hammered home suspicions that police might have crossed paths with an abductor early on, but the inconsistent direction let opportunities slip, bogging the effort down in debates over splitting resources across competing hypotheses. Jubilant's reflections circled back to how the best thorough investigation meant scrutinizing broadly. Yet that general everyone under the microscope approach highlighted the directional drift, where lines pursued to the coroner sometimes circled without a locked-in path, leaving gaps in momentum year after year. We see stories unfolding around these pivots, like Jubilant's daily ritual of scanning tips for that one breakthrough, only to chase sightings that built excitement but fizzled, mirroring the broader frustration of a probe that started strong on abduction but wavered without a steady compass. Rowley's on-site reassurance to the dad evolved into larger searches that ballooned to 200 officers and locals by nightfall, yet the initial mindset delayed the criminal shift Partridge sensed intuitively. The homicide takeover in 2015 under Jubilant ramped interviews, but the 7-year lock-in on abduction meant resources funneled there, sidelining parallels until the 2021 remains hunt forced to rethink, dividing opinions as families questioned the late turn. Jubilin's open-minded stance on possibilities clashed with the inquest's later accident lean, where vacated dates in 2024 spotlighted how pursuit of one theory undercut the other, weakening the chain. Podcasts dissected these shifts, interviewing folks who argued early abductor brushes got missed amid the whiplash, while Jubilin's exit amid recording charges symbolized internal fractures that fragmented direction further. The probe stats, thousands of docs, interviews, impressed on paper, but the lack of cohesion let debates over splits bog progress, turning what could have been streamlined into a meandering hunt that eroded public faith step by step. The ring of threats. For the specific suspects, we shift to the most critical piece of this abduction theory, the suspects. And it's shocking how they don't just boil down to one, but pile up into a tangled mess, enough to underscore the sheer complexity of the case and the dangers that had William surrounded back then. At the time of William's disappearance in 2014, the Kendall area on the NSW Mid-North Coast simmered with a tangled web of local risks, including a sheer number of registered offenders that stunned investigators like Gary Jubilin, who likened the concentration to mosquitoes swarming a light, highlighting how multiple convicted threats lurked in intertwined social circles and made the rural spot far more dangerous than it appeared. Bill Spedding, the local washing machine repairman out of Laurieton, got pegged as the prime suspect early in the opportunistic kidnapper scenario, mainly because he'd shown up at William's foster grandmother's place on the 48 Benaroon Drive the week before to fix a faulty machine, waiting on parts that hadn't come through yet, which he later clocked as his only tie after spotting the street photo in news reports. Spedding comes across as a devoted grandfather, known around town for being straight up honest, loyal, and the type who'd hand over his shirt if you needed it, going back 28 years in the community. His alibi for the day lines up like this, handling office paperwork until around 9:25 a.m., then walking over to meet his wife Margaret at the coffee shop, grabbing eats and coffee, confirmed by a MasterCard statement at 9:44. Heading to the Laredo School Assembly by 10:20 to watch his grandson Ben get an award, settling into a seat waiting for the kids to file in, and bolting right after for a service call in Don Bowman, which sat in the opposite direction from Kendall out of Laurieton. A few days later, police called him into the Port Macquarie station, where he handed over smartphone data without a fight, let them photocopy his diary and notebook, and laid out his alibi casually, figuring it was just a standard once-over. By January 2015, warrants hit Spedding's Bonnie Hills home, turning into a declared crime scene as they dug up the yard, drained the septic tank, poked around under the house near those milk cartons propped up to keep stuff dry, and brought in cadaver dogs, unearthing a Spider-Man toy from his van that belonged to his grandson and had been kicking around for years, backed up by other kids who confirmed it. Spedding figures the tip-off came from someone he knew, dredging up 30-year-old mistreatment allegations that got investigated and tossed back then, flipping him from person of interest to prime suspect and throwing the whole probe off track. Detective Justin Moynihan hammered him in a 6-hour grilling, accusing Spedding of swinging by the house for the machine fix, spotting William playing unsupervised in the yard, snatching him up and bolting, but Spedding flat out denied ever meeting the boy, and on the voicemail claim from the foster mother, at 9:03 a.m., experts cleared it as a miss because he was on another call, nothing deleted. Once released, a detective on the drive back dropped the line, "We know you did it, we're gonna get you, gonna come arrest you," hitting Spedding with the realization he was in deep. He even rang Moynihan to flag the coffee alibi backed by the bank statement, only to get shut down with, "Tired of your bullshit and lies." Come March 2015, a massive bushland search near his place stemmed from neighbor Dean Pollard's tip about seeing Spedding's white van on a track the day after, roping in dogs, divers, and dozens of officers with zero results. Spedding's alibi for that next day held at an AFL presentation at the local club where footage captured him, but police skipped checking it to avoid tipping him off, leaving it to his lawyers to track down later, even though his diary noted 2 p.m. there, unexplored by them. Gary Jubilin took the reins in 2015 with Spedding already the public bullseye, but delays in nailing down the assembly alibi, dragmoring witness memories amid dozens of similar events, though Jubilin noted generally it pays to lock those early without slamming prior teams. April 2015 blindsided Spedding with an arrest on those 1987 historical assault charges despite prior dismissal. Moynihan allegedly mobbed off camera Mutar, "Nice washing machine man, we're gonna ruin you," and tying his name to William. Locked in Cessnock for 8 weeks, Spedding faced guards in body armor stripping him, one jabbing a nightstick to his neck demanding he talk. Or else, then media mobs on release, a cop's wife neighbor chasing him out fearing for kids, business crumbling, life gutted. Court tossed the charges for unreliable evidence, acquitting him and ordering costs covered. The 2019 inquest cleared him fully, assembly alibi locked by parent Gordon Young spotting Spedding watching Ben's award, Pollard's claim debunked as just matching van color without certainty, crumbling the case against him in 2 straight days. Spedding sued for malicious prosecution, netting $1.48 million owed in 2022 that climbed to $1.8 million, calling for an apology over the wreckage to his business, Rep Worldwide Damage Unfixable. Tony Jones, another person of interest holed up in watch-up just 20 minutes from Kendall, broke his public silence in an exclusive current affair, sit down, dodging cameras and bolting into the police station amid harassment claims, spitting at a reporter, and brushing off questions with, not in mood to chat. Katrina, his estranged relative sharing the roof, opened up after 3.5 years of suspicion, unable to say he did or didn't but feeling off from day one, painting his routine as heading bush, drinking, or visiting unknowns 9 times out of 10. Jones's alibi pinned on fixing a hot water system with the next-door neighbor who later died of cancer. But Katrina heard from family he collecting scrap metal in the bush, leaving sober but rolling home drunk by lunchtime. She probed the morning gap. Did he drink and drive back? Spot some gentleman at the hotel who was with him, nobody knowing but him and whoever. The family's white Toyota station wagon got seized for forensics, matching the suspicious description the foster mother clocked that day. A coincidence on make and model. But Jones insisted it belonged to his ex-wife, never letting him drive, though Katrina confirmed seeing him at the wheel. The car shared with that neighbor, Katrina unaware of the hot water tale until hearing it fresh, and no word from Jones since. He turned defensive like never before. Katrina's gut sensing potential after knowing him long, but holding back accusation, urging if he knows anything to speak for God's sake. Jones mentioned planning to grab fuel for the search effort, but unclear if he followed through. Katrina stumped on the defensiveness. Bigfoot feeder, or Paul, emerged as another POI in the same social circle Strike Force Rosen probed, with Jones downplaying him as an acquaintance not a good mate, but Katrina detailing hour-long chats standing or over coffee laughing and talking, far from casual. Feeder denied being tight with Jones. Ties loop back to Spedding selling an appliance like a washing machine to the Jones family, plus visits to William's foster grandmother's home, the week before he vanished and days after it turned into a crime scene. Common threads in the lone offender angle include those strange white station wagon and gray sedan parked right across from the foster grandmother's that morning, wedged between driveways with windows down, unfamiliar locally and gone after, Jubilant eyeing it as opportunistic play. Neighbor Ron Chapman's account had a 4WD speeding by his place with a Spider-Man-clad boy in the back seat, hands pressed to the window unrestrained, driver a fair-skinned woman in her late 20s to 30s with blonde hair and a top bun. But police dragged 2 years for a formal statement despite a detective buying it, driver still unidentified. The foster mother's voicemail to Spedding at 9:03 a.m., querying the washing machine part doesn't tie directly to abduction. Jubilant pegged the abductor as likely a local or deliberate visitor on that dead-end street. No accident, rare but feasible snatch from the driveway. Katrina pushed for re-questioning Jones since he sidestepped straight answers, his drunk lunch arrival dodging the core query. Jones faced multiple grilling over suspected abduction, no charges yet, his links to this web of people, places and ties poised to crack things open. Community chatter on Reddit and podcasts suspects police grazed an abductor early in the mix. We dig into the pedophile ring angle within the abduction theory, where the biological grandmother Natalie went public in 2015, convinced William had been snatched by an organized network that had been shadowing the foster family beforehand, exploiting their vulnerable setup as an easy mark, with the eye-catching Spider-Man costume potentially aiding survival if he was kept alive somewhere hidden. She pushed this hard in a video plea that year, stressing human intervention over any lost child narrative, arguing the rural Kendall isolation, sparse traffic and quick escape routes via the town or winding bush roads, made it prime for a Cora grab without leaving traces. Detective Inspector Gary Jubilant weighed in on the PD scenario as particularly unique for a 3-year-old, noting how such networks typically zeroed in on older kids. But he didn't rule out deliberate stalking of the foster arrangement, urging investigators to dun the PD mindset and see through the perpetrator's eyes, framing it as pure evil crashing into innocence. We track how this fed into broader suspicions of a ring operating in the shadows, preying on the area's quiet facade that masked deeper risks. Grandparents as Parents Again Group, or JA, is a support network for grandparents raising grandkids right there in Kendall, New South Wales, where 2 members stood out as convicted offenders who might have crossed paths on the exact day William vanished, September 12, 2014. Their vehicles, a white station wagon and a gray sedan, lined up with descriptions of strange cars spotted parked directly across from the foster grandmother's house that morning. Slotted awkwardly between driveways with the driver's windows rolled down, raising red flags on what should have been a quiet dead-end street with no reason for outsiders to linger like that. Gary Jubelin himself compared the density of convicted offenders in this tiny rural spot to mosquitoes swarming a light, pointing to how these threats clustered in overlapping social loops that turned the area into a hotspot of potential danger. William's biological mother fueled the ring angle early on, convinced a PD network had been tracking the Foster setup, zeroing in on the eye-catching Spider-Man suit that made him stand out and the isolated bush location ripe for a quick grab without witnesses. JAPA's former president, Paul Bickford, had already stepped down a year prior, and another ex-member faced charges tied to child offenses, which only amplified the scrutiny on the group's underbelly amid the abduction push. Pushing against that, no hard evidence ever pinned PAY members directly to the snatch, with the group cooperating fully with police from the start and no charges ever sticking in the Tyrrell probe. Their alibis held that they were just visiting one another that day, though family chatter suggested one was out scraping metal in the bush instead, and when pressed, they flat out denied any hand in it. Police illustrated the vehicles publicly to jog memories, but zero footage surfaced to show them hauling off a child, leaving it all circumstantial. The inquest from 2019 to 2020 couldn't forge a solid tie, and by 2021, the shift toward an accident and cover-up narrative drained the abduction theory's momentum, sidelining ring possibilities as too thin without physical hooks. Bickford took the stand during those sessions but drew blanks on any recollection or connection that mattered, while tips like Dean Pollard's on a speeding van didn't even confirm overlap with JPA rides, keeping the case against them more smoke than fire. Looking back at what these folks had on their records, Paul Bickford, the ex-JPA head, racked up charges for indecent assault on a child, landing as a convicted PD figure who breached reporting conditions and hit court again in 2016 over offenses. Another former member drew similar charges for children-related crimes, fitting into a broader pattern where JPA pulled in multiple convicted offenders, contributing to that unnerving concentration Jubelin flagged in the Kendall zone, where intertwined circles of these types made everyday spots feel loaded with risk. Ties to Tony Jones ran through the local POI network, with Jones himself a convicted PD offender hit for indecent assault on an 11-year-old, operating as a POI out of Watchope near Kendall, and sharing the same social group under Strike Force Rosen's lens as the JPA crowd. Though no outright membership pinned him to the group itself, all of them played ball with police in the end. As of now, they're off the suspect radar, with the 2024-2025 inquest zeroing in on an accident and cover-up setup, like a balcony fall followed by hiding Williams' remains via that Mazda's odd pings to Batar Creek Road. The abduction and PD ring threads got pushed aside for lacking physical bite, hearings even vacated in December 2024 pending coroner findings down the line, police leaning hard into an internal homicide angle over any organized ring play. No fresh JPA leads popped in 2025. Rewards still dangling but searches tilted toward recovery, not chasing abductions anymore. We see how the ring's suspicion hinged on that offender density and vehicle matches. But without direct links or footage, it crumbled under the inquest pivot, Bickford's testimony adding zilch, and prior crimes like his assaults and breaches painting a troubling backdrop without tying to Williams' grab. The social overlaps with Jones amplified the web feel, yet cooperation and no charges kept it from solidifying, especially as the probe evolved away from external networks toward family dynamics. Jubelin's early mosquito swarm analogy captured the Arizona current of threats, but the lack of confirmation on alibis or sightings left contradictions glaring, no proof they met for more than chit-chat, vehicles publicized without hits, and the shift to internal theories underscoring how abduction faded without the goods. Mother N piled up in the alibis clashing family stories, like bush scraps versus visits, and the high offender count in Kendall screaming risk, but yielding no smoking gun, with the inquest's focus change highlighting how ring ideas stayed speculative amid zero physical or witness lock-ins. Bickford stepped down timing and charges fed down, yet his inquest blank slate and no gapy explicit role in Jones's circle diluted the push, keeping it as a haunting what-if in the theory's cracks rather than a nailed-down plot. The accident. Now, let's pivot to the accident and cover-up theory, which investigators like Gary Jubelin have come to see as the strongest fit after years of digging, and break down its roots, why the foster mother draws the most scrutiny, the supporting details, and the custody fears driving it all. We trace the accident and cover-up hypothesis back to the core work of Strike Force Rosen and the New South Wales coronial inquest, where it solidified as the leading direction starting in 2021 after investigators peeled away from earlier abduction angles. The core idea here holds that William took a tumble from the balcony at his foster grandmother's place right at 2:04 a.m. on September 12, 2014, with the foster mother stumbling upon it and then scrambling to hide the remains to dodge the fallout. We note how this unconfirmed gained traction through the 2024 hearings, where detectives laid out their belief in an accidental fall from the balcony sparking the death, followed by a deliberate cover-up to bury the truth. This shift marked a pivot from external threats to something internal, aligning with gaps in the scene that pointed away from a stranger grab or wander into the bush. The foster mother draws heavy suspicion because of her actions in those immediate moments after the disappearance, skipping the straight call to police, and instead reaching out to the foster father at 10:55 a.m. before looping in neighbors around 1100 to stage what looked like a frantic search for an alibi. Her story about William playing hide and seek kept shifting over time, and her track record of strict discipline came under fire, with past accusations of slapping William himself and assaulting another child. Though that conviction got overturned in 2025, it still painted a pattern that raised flags for police, who suspect she handled the remains disposal herself to keep it quiet. Supporting evidence builds on the absence of any traces showing William strayed from the yard, like no small footprints leading off or blood splatter anywhere, coupled with cadaver dogs failing to pick up his scent heading far into the surrounding terrain. Decomposition tests run by investigators confirmed how quickly the remains could break down in Kendall's damp environment, accounting for why large-scale searches in 2020 and 2021 came up empty despite the effort. The November 2024 inquest sessions brought out secret crime commission tapes, where the foster mother faced grilling on the cover-up, breaking down in tears to deny dumping the remains. But police countered by revealing their stance on an on-site death that fit the timeline without external involvement. At the heart of the motive sits the foster mother's fear of losing custody over her other child, especially with welfare checks looming that could scrutinize her disciplinary history and trigger a full probe from child services. That background of tough handling risked everything, pushing her to conceal the accident rather than face the system head-on. She and her husband went public in a 2021 podcast insisting they had nothing to hide. But the silence that followed only fueled for calculated hush-up to safeguard their family setup. Experts and investigators lean hard into this as the most trusted framework, with Gary Jubelin, the former lead on the case, who once championed abduction leads, now seeing the inquest death emphasis as the strongest way to square no remains turning up after 11 years. Police have pledged an exhaustive dig but prioritize the accident and cover up as a clean internal homicide fit, outpacing other theories in explanatory power. The coroner anticipated evidence pointing to someone taking William. Yet the 2024 hearings zeroed in on the foster mother angle as the prevailing belief, with Jubelin probing her directly on accident and cover-up possibilities in a never-before-released interview that underscored the need to scrutinize everyone until cleared. This consensus holds it as the narrative that best threads the physical voids and behavioral cues, sidelining abduction for lack of traction. Confirmed details reinforce the push, like the inquest kicking back off in 2024 with fresh evidence stacking against the foster mother, who clings to her innocence claim, while police had her in their sights for years building the case. Hearings got vacated in December 24 waiting coroner findings down the line, and the 2021 turn to accident dynamics effectively weakened abduction pursuits, cementing this as the probe's anchor. Rumors swirl around the remains tucked away in a suitcase per contested witness accounts, dissected in podcasts, while his biological grandmother hinted at foster family internal messes demanding a cover-up for the mishap. Whispers persist about the foster parents relocating homes afterward, their quietude signaling confirmation of the hide. And though the biological mother dismissed ring involvement, some murmurs suggest the foster mother's discipline habits might have spiraled into something fatal beyond mere accident. We pull together how the hypothesis roots in those investigative pivots, with the balcony fall explaining the instant death and the foster mother's post-event moves screaming evasion, her discipline past and custody stakes providing the why behind the wipe. Jubelin's evolution from abduction advocate to backing this death focus highlights its pull. As police exhaustive promises channel into internal homicide over scattered alternatives, the coroner's lens sharpening on her role as the most credible thread. The lack of yard departure signs and dog trails, plus rapid decomposition math, seal the evidential lean, while her taped denials clash with police on-site death reveal, all under welfare shadow that could strip her world apart. Confirmed inquest restarts and long-held suspicions lock it in, even as rumors of suitcase stashes or discipline overreach add speculative layers, painting a foster dynamic ripe for concealment to cling to control. This trusted path stands out for stitching behavioral red flags with scene voids, investigators like Jubelin targeting broad, but homing in here as the unyielding core, outlasting abductions fade without the hard links. The overturned conviction lingers as pattern proof, her nothing to hide echo now a hollow ring against the mounting internal narrative. Custody fears the silent driver keeping remains from view. Hearings pauses and evidence builds affirm the priority, rumors filling gaps with suitcase tales or family hints, Yet the accident cover core endures as the probe's steadfast bet, experts nodding to its explanatory edge after years of sifting. The core issue with the accident and cover-up theory boils down to a glaring lack of evidence that could pin it down definitively. Yet what if accomplices were in the mix? As those very gaps in proof might stem from a coordinated effort to scrub the scene and timeline clean. The foster father draws suspicion as a potential accomplice in the cover-up, believed to have learned about the accident through a phone call from the foster mother at 10:55 a.m., just 1 minute before she reported the disappearance to police at 11:06, which could imply he helped conceal or at least stayed silent to shield the family unit. He faced charges for lying to investigators about that very call, but the conviction got tossed in February 2025 due to a big hole in the prosecution's case, yet he lingers as a person of interest in the overall concealment narrative. We see how this timing raises flags, suggesting he might have coordinated next steps rather than urging an immediate alert, fitting into a pattern where his role could have been pivotal in keeping the incident under wraps without drawing outside eyes right away. The foster grandmother, who has since passed away, comes under scrutiny too, with her home serving as the scene and her possible awareness, tied to her blood tie with the foster mother, potentially agreeing to the hush-up out of familial loyalty. The 2024 inquest hearings hinted at her involvement in the concealment, with speculation bubbling that she participated by allowing resources on her property to aid the disposal of William's remains, though her death cuts off any direct testimony. This positions her as someone who might have turned a blind eye or actively supported the effort, leveraging her closeness to the foster mother to maintain secrecy without escalating the situation beyond the household. Neighbors factor in as unwitting or deliberate helpers, summoned by the foster mother around 1100 to join what looked like a genuine search effort shortly after the incident, crafting a chaotic alibi scene before police rolled up and possibly distracting from the real sequence of events. Their quick involvement paints them as part of staging a missing child panic, which could have bought time or muddied the initial response, without them realizing the full picture, or perhaps with some level of complicity, if they sensed something off but pressed on anyway. In terms of roles, the foster father likely stepped in for coordination via that immediate post-accident phone call, offering silence or advice on the cover-up to keep things contained, with his bugged car failing to snag any direct chatter, but his overall behavior flagging as evasive. The foster grandmother's part revolved around permitting use of her property or assets for disposing of William's remains, holding her tongue as a protective family member to avoid unraveling the household. Neighbors played into it by jumping into the fake search, making the scene appear like a standard missing kid response and potentially diverting early attention without grasping the deeper deception. Related evidence circles the foster mother's call to the foster father at 10:55 a.m., right after the Tunsu 4 accident, timed before alerting authorities at 11:06, hinting at coordination over panic and a direct police report. Neighbors got pulled in swiftly to the group effort alibi ahead of the official kickoff, layering on the appearance of community frenzy. The foster parents' 2021 charges for assault on a different child, the mother guilty of intimidation, the father cleared, spotlight a disciplinary that ties into cover-up motives, though overturned in 2025, still feeding into suspicions of family-wide knowledge. Inquest tapes from 2024's Crime Commission sessions have the foster mother denying involvement, but police infer broader family awareness, with jubilant probing scenarios that loop in help from kin during unreleased interviews. Police bugging the foster parents' cars, as revealed by a former detective, aimed to eavesdrop on cover-up talks but turned up no smoking gun confessions, leaving the evidence trail reliant on timing and patterns rather than hard captures. Problems with the concealment and accomplice evidence run deep, mostly stacking as circumstantial without the punch of physical proof that any helper handled William's remains, like absent DNA or eyewitness accounts of transport, boiling down to just behavioral cues and timelines that suggest knowledge but don't nail it. No charges have stuck, with the 2020-40-25 inquest honing in on the foster mother as the solo disposer without prosecuting side players, hearings pushed back in December before awaiting findings, and the director of public prosecutions holding off post-inquest. Alibi defenses hold water, like the foster father's quashed lying conviction framing his coordination as innocent, or neighbors viewing their help as routine for a mission, without anything fishy. Direct proof falls short, with bug cars and tapes yielding no confession chatter. The foster grandmother's death-blocking testimony, and inquest sessions with folks like Bickford or other persons of interest offering no ties to family assistance. The 2021 theory pivot to accident diluted external angles, but left internal accomplices as guesswork, with police leaning toward a solo internal homicide act over group plotting. Public whispers hint at grandmother involvement in the hush-up without official backing, and the foster parents' 2021 podcast claim of nothing to hide counters the narrative, underscoring how the evidence teeters on inference over ironclad links. We pull apart how the foster father's call timing fuels the accomplice angle, potentially looping him into advice or quiet complicity, his cleared charges notwithstanding. While the grandmother's property access suggests an enabling role tied to blood bonds, her passing a barrier to clarity. Neighbors' quick rally to the search spotlights their part in alibi building, perhaps unwitting but timely in muddying waters. Evidence leans on that pre-report phone ping and neighbor summons, creating a facade. Plus the overturned assault raps, hinting at family patterns ripe for concealment, inquest tapes implying wider knowledge without outright proof, and bug efforts falling flat on captures. Yet the circumstantial nature dogs it all. No tangible traces of remains handling or group plots, charges on ice amid inquest delays, holding as benign, and zero confessions from surveillance leaving gaps. The pivot weakened broader theories but kept accomplice roles speculative. Police favoring a lone act, whispers of grandmother aid unconfirmed, and the nothing to hide stance clashing with suspicions, all painting a web of inference over solid hits. This layers the foster father's quash case as a big hole, win but lingering cloud, grandmother's relation as motive without voice, neighbors as scene setters sans intent proof, evidence timelines teasing coordination with the slam, inquest denials versus inferred knowledge, bug fails underscoring the indirect haul. Problems amplify with no prosecutions chasing sidekicks, hearings stalled for coroner digs, defenses framing innocence in calls and helps, dead ends from deceased witnesses, and theory shifts sidelining group notions for solo focus, public echoes unbacked but persistent. The podcast pushback a counter to the narrative's pull. The sentences. If the accident and cover-up theory holds true, the foster mother would face the heaviest charges as the principal figure, starting with charges under Section 18 of the Crimes Act, stemming from negligent conduct that led to the fatal fall from the balcony, carrying a maximum of 25 years imprisonment, though courts typically hand down 10 to 15 years for non-intentional cases like this where carelessness rather than intent drives the outcome. We'd also see interfering with a corpse under Section 316, for handling and concealing the remains to erase the evidence, maxing out at 10 years behind bars. Then perverting the course of justice via Section 319 comes in for staging a fake search, altering statements, and crafting alibis to mislead investigators, punishable by up to 14 years. Concealing a serious indictable offense under Section 360A fits the hiding of the manslaughter itself, adding a potential 5-year cap. Police from Strikeforce Rosen recommended these exact charges against her back on June 27, 2023, pushing for prosecution on perverting justice and interfering with remains, but the Director of Public Prosecutions has held off, waiting for the inquest to wrap before greenlighting anything. Shifting to the foster father, his role would tag him as an accessory after the fact to manslaughter under Section 346, knowing about the incident and aiding the cover-up, which could mirror the 25-year maximum, but often gets reduced since he's not the main actor, depending on how much he helped bury the truth. Perverting justice would hit him too for staying silent or bolstering false alibis, again up to 14 years. He already caught charges in 2023 for lying to the Crime Commission, pleaded not guilty in November that year, and saw the conviction quashed in February 2025 over glaring holes in the evidence, which shows how prosecution stumbles even on side issues here. We track how these would stack if proven, but the lack of direct ties keeps it hypothetical. The foster grandmother, though deceased now, would have drawn accessory after the fact charges if alive, allowing her property to serve as a staging ground for the cover-up, or helping conceal the fall's aftermath, potentially facing that same 25-year ceiling tied to manslaughter assistance. Perverting justice could layer on another 14 years for any role in muddying the waters early on. Her passing complicates things legally, but it underscores how family layers could entangle multiple counts if the theory pans out. Neighbors enter as potential peripherals if their involvement went beyond unwitting help, facing perverting the course of justice for joining the staged search that created chaos as an alibi shield, maxing at 14 years, though penalties usually lighten if they acted without full knowledge, treating it more like misguided support than deliberate deceit. In New South Wales sentencing, a combo like manslaughter and cover-up elements can land 10 to 25 years overall if convicted on multiples, with aggregation possible but courts weighing totality to avoid crushing loads. Parole eligibility kicks in early for first-time offenders showing good behavior, maybe shaving years off served time. Non-custodial options like community service or fines might float for minor roles, but with a child's death in the mix, judges lean custodial heavy. No way around the gravity. We can't convict them right now as of October 2025, hammered by the no-body rule or corpus delicti principle, where prosecutors must prove death beyond reasonable doubt without the remains, making manslaughter or related charges a steep uphill battle in NSW law that demands solid confirmation of fatality. The inquest drags on. He'd been vacated in December 2024 pending coroner findings projected for 2026 or later, and DPP's hold on charges post police recommendations from 2023 keeps everything frozen until that wraps. No green light yet despite the push. Evidence stays circumstantial at best, like call timings and behavior flags, but no DNA traces or witnesses to Remains movement. And those crime commission tapes capture her tearful denials of dumping anything, undercutting the narrative without a smoking gun. Presumption of innocence locks it down, with the foster parents holding firm on no wrongdoing. Facing 0 charges tied to William's case beyond the unrelated assault conviction flipped in February and May 2025, which dents prosecution credibility further. Legal roadblocks pile up, like the father's quashed lying conviction exposing weak spots in the state's case. Appeals succeeding where evidence faltered. 11 years elapsed. Dims minor offenses under statutes of limitations, though manslaughter carries none, but the drag erodes momentum without fresh breaks. Police stick to internal homicide focus in their exhaustive probe, yet admit insufficient proof to nail it, keeping the $1 million reward dangling without closure. Confirmed updates reinforce the stall that June 27, 2023, recommendation for her on perverting and interfering got DPP review but no action. November 2024 inquest saw police allege she hid remains post-fall with her denying it in tears. February and May 2025 quashed the assault sideshow weakening overall leverage, and October 2025 Spider-Man suit lead ruled irrelevant, no game changer. Rumors float wilder takes, like podcasts chewing over a family group cover-up with the remains stuffed in a suitcase from contested witness whispers, or the biological mother dropping hints of foster internal messes, demanding a veil over the accident. Foster parents' post-event home moves and zipped lips get spun as tacit admission, while the biological mother shot down ring ideas, but son murmurs push foster mother discipline tipping fatal beyond mishap. We lay out how these charges would cascade if the theory sticks. Manslaughter's negligence tag hitting the foster mother core, with 25-year exposure dialed to 10 to 15 for the fall's carelessness, corp inference capping 10 for the hide, justice perversion 14 for the alibi games, and concealing adding 5, all police flagged in 2023 but iced by DPP awaiting inquest end. Foster father's accessory slot mirrors manslaughter max reduced for support role, perverting stacking 14, his crime commission lie already tested and tossed in 2025 over evidence gaps. Grandmother's hypothetical accessory pulls 25 for aiding manslaughter fallout, perverting 14, neighbor's lighter perverting at 14 if witting but often softened unwitting. Sentencing blends to 10-25 years combo, parole for good conduct, custodial lock-in over non-custodial rarity with the remains at stake. The no conviction wall stands firm. Sans remains proving death, corpus delicti blocking manslaughter proof beyond doubt, inquest limbo with 2024 vacates and 2026 outlook holding DPP back post 2023 recs. Circumstantial threads like behaviors lack direct punch, no DNA or transport eyes, tapes her denying dumps. Innocence presumption shields amid Noem-linked charges, assaults quashed eroding state bite. Times toll hits minor limits but spares manslaughter, police exhausted but proof short, reward signals open hunt. June 2023 recs, November allegations of hiding with denials, 2025 October suit flop, all confirm impasse. Podcast suitcase rumors, grandmother internal jabs, home shifts as cover nods. Discipline fatal spins add unproven layers, but theory's strength clashes convict hurdles. Inquest unfinished preserving doubt. Manslaughter max tempers to negligence reality, accessory reductions for non-leads, pervertings 14 versatile for alibis, concealings 5 niche but additive. Totals custodial heavy. Sans parole mercy unlikely here. Corpus blocks without remains, DPP freeze post-rec, circumstantial voids, tape innocence hold, quashed priors, time erosion. Probes internal homicide bet stays theoretical, exhaustive vows ring hollow. Sans breakthrough, rewards lure underscores unresolved. Rumors amplify family veil whispers, but legal steel demands proof of death first. Inquest drag the ultimate stall. How the search got destroyed. The initial search that kicked off on September 12, 2014, turned into a total debacle from the jump, all because of extreme disorganization and a complete failure to lock down Benaroon Drive as a potential crime scene, letting hundreds to thousands of civilians swarm in, even folks on horseback stomping through the foster grandmother's yard, and the nearby bush, which could have wiped out key evidence like footprints, or any traces if foul play was in the mix. We see how the cops handled it like a straight lost child rescue operation, instead of treating it as a site to preserve, skipping any cordoning off the street, even as cars rolled right through, and the whole scene devolved into bedlam from uncontrolled searchers, resulting in zero control over ground zero where William was last spotted, turning what should have been a pristine area into a trampled mess that gutted forensic chances right out of the gate. Problems kept stacking throughout the process, like those delays in going public with key details such as the suspicious vehicles, holding back for a full 12 months in some strategic move that ended up stifling timely tips from witnesses who who might have let details fade by the time info dropped, leaving potential breakthroughs hanging without fresh eyes on them. A major snag hit hard with not firing up a full criminal investigation from the word go, leaning heavy into that little boy lost mode, which pushed off forensic lockdowns during those critical early hours, a blunder that echoed as a tough lesson rolled into later cases like Gus Lamont in 2025, where they tightened protocols to avoid the same pitfalls. The abrupt swing in 2021 from chasing abduction leads to honing in on accident, and cover-up theories stirred up real division between police and the public, igniting backlash over the inquest's dragging pace, and those alleged leaks that just muddied the waters further, fracturing trust and scattering focus as families and communities questioned the flip without clear reasoning. Internal shifts wrecked the directions big time, like Gary Jubilin's sensational ouster before 2019 over secretly recording a person of interest without a warrant, which spiraled into his resignation and criminal charges directly linked to his William duties, throwing off momentum as he pleaded not guilty and stressed the operational need to capture those chats. But it left the probe leaderless at a key turn and disrupted the chain of command. Delays in nailing down alibis dragged out for months, muddling witness memories as they mixed up school assemblies, since dozens had come and gone in the interim, weakening those evidence chains that could have cleared paths quicker if handled fresh. The concentration of convicted offenders around Kendall, which Jubilin compared to mosquitoes buzzing a light, spun up tangled social circles that pulled resources into dead ends without yielding solid connections, diverting the hunt from broader leads while chasing shadows in those interconnected groups. Justin Moynihan's aggressive tactics threw more curves, accusing folks based on preconceived ideas without thorough vetting first, like those erroneous voicemail deletion claims that later proved innocent through expert checks, derailing focus and burning credibility on hunches that didn't pan out. The inquest's sluggish crawl, with hearings vacated in December 2024 and coroner findings pushed to 2026 or beyond, spotlighted those ongoing failures, leaving the case unresolved as of October 2025 with no final submissions even on the calendar, dragging out what should have been sharper resolutions. Dan Box, unpacking it all in his 2025 podcasts like What Went Wrong in the Search for William Tyrrell, broke down these missteps, highlighting how the initial chaos and constant shifts left the entire effort fractured, with findings teased but stalled in delivery. Consequences rippled out wide, including a total void in forensic evidence or solid eyewitness accounts after 11 years, as inquest testimony laid bare no clues turning up at Benaroon Drive or anywhere else, stalling any shot at closure for the family and keeping the mystery locked in limbo. Eroded public trust bubbled up fierce, with backlash slapping current investigators as having absolutely failed William Tyrrell, breeding false hope in communities that banked on abduction rescues which never came through, turning support into skepticism and slowing tip flows. Wasted resources mounted high like that 50 square kilometers calmed over 2 weeks in 2014 yielding zilch thanks to the trampled grounds, and those high-profile 2021 digs unearthing irrelevant fabric that just prolonged the unsolved tag without progress. The family's nightmare stretched even deeper, with the biological mother laying blame on carers for dropping the ball on protection, while foster parents weathered scrutiny without charges, their presumption of innocence stretched thin by the endless drag that strained every bond. Police shouldered the bulk of responsibility for those site security flops, as witnesses painted it with no crime scene established yet, and not in the slightest push to restrict access, straight up hindering evidence preservation from hour one and setting a tone of chaos that echoed through the years. Jubilin and Moynihan caught heat for zeroing in on wrong suspects like Bill Spedding with those preconceived notions, sparking his malicious prosecution lawsuit victory in 2022, as Jubilin's methods drew fire for skipping early alibi clarifications that could have redirected sooner. Current lead David Laidlaw took flack for funneling a full year into Tyrrell over 19 other cold cases, per 2024 podcast digs, feeding into the mismanagement vibe that bogged the broader system. The coroner and DPP carried weight for the inquest delays, vacating holding off on charges after 2023 recommendations, pushing findings into 2026 and leaving the probe hanging without resolution. Overall, systemic breakdowns in NSW police protocols, from the bungled initial response to shaky internal accountability, shattered any cohesive directions, with experts like Dan Box calling out how these layers compounded to strand the case in bedlam, without an end in sight. We pull apart how that day one search mess, with civilians overrunning the yard like a stampede, nuked potential traces right when forensics mattered most. Police's rescue lens over crime scene smarts letting cars churn through and bedlam rule. Zero cordons turning ground zero into a lost cause. Those year-long holds on vehicle deets meant strategic but killing witness recall, stat lays that choked off leads before they bloomed. Skipping the criminal jump for little boy lost, vibes postponed locks on the site. Critical hours slipping away, a fix they patched into Gus Lamont protocols later to stem the bleed. The 2021 theory flipped to accident and fuses with the public, backlash scorching the inquest crawl and leak whispers that poisoned clarity, splitting camps and slowing cooperation. Jubilin's wiretap bust yanked the rug pre-2019, charges over his William work halting flow as he fought back on need grounds, resignation ripping continuity. Alibi drags let memories fog over assembly mixes, chains brittle from the weight. Offender clusters in Kendall. Jubilin's mosquitoes swarm, knotted circles pulling probes into rabbit holes without exits, resources burned on phantoms. Moynihan's Hunkus's voicemail flubs debunked later, skewed tracks and torched trust. Inquest snail pace 2024 vacates to 2026 plus findings, flagged failures in real time October 2025 still submission free. Box's 2025 pods dissected the wreck, chaos to shifts fracturing the backbone teases dangling without drops. Fallout hit evidence hard 11 years blank on forensics or eyes inquest bearing Ben Arun voids, closure starved. Public faith crumbled, failed William, tags fostering doubt, false hopes crashing into walls, tips drying up. Resources squandered 20 zilch from tramples, 2021 fabric flops dragging unsolved longer. Family torment amplified, biomom's care blame, fosters scrutinized sans charges, innocence presumption frayed by limbo, police-owned site slips, witness, no establishment, calls nailing restriction fails, preservation gutted from go. Jubiling Moynihan blamed for spedding hunch hunts, 2022 lawsuit wins spotlighting early alibi skips. Laidlaw caught prioritizing Tyrrell over 19 colds per 2024 pods, mismanagement tag sticking. DPP accountable for drags charge holds 23 Rex 2026 push leaving limbo. Systemic NSW protocol breaks response to accountability directions shattered. Box experts compounding to bedlam unresolved. That opening search fiasco let chaos reign. Civilians horseback trampling yard bush, evidence like prints lost if play fall. Rescue over preserve letting cars churn. Bedlam uncontrolled. Zero sight grip. Vehicle detail delays year-long strategic stifled tips. Witnesses faded. Criminal skip for lost mode delayed forensics gold hours lemolesson patched later. 2021 shift divided police public. Backlash inquest drag leaks poisoning. Jubilin wire bust per 2019 halted. Charges resignation ripping. Alibi months fogged assemblies, chains weak, Kendall offender swarms tangled but fruitless, resources wasted, Moynihan hunch accuses voicemail debunked skewed. Inquest snail, 2024 vacates 2026 findings failures flagged October 2025 submission less. Box pods dissected chaos shifts fracture. Evidence void 11 years inquest Ben Arun blanks closure denied. Trust eroded failed labels false crashed, tips dry. Resources burned 2050 Camus trampled nothing 2021 fabric flops prolonged family nightmare bio blame, foster scrutiny. Innocence strained limbo restriction hindering. Jubiling Moynihan spedding hunches lawsuit 2022 alibi skips. Laidlaw Tyrrell priority over 1924 pods mismanage. DPP drags charge holds post 2023-2026 limbo. Protocol breaks response accountability directions destroyed box compounding bedlam. In the end, we wrap this up by pulling the lessons from William Tyrrell's case. A stark example of how unchecked theories can steer an investigation off course, wasting years and eroding trust. Right from the start, the abduction hypothesis dominated, framing everything as a stranger snatch in those critical minutes. But it locked resources into chasing vehicles and sightings for 7 years, generating false hope while overlooking internal angles. We see how that single focus delayed forensic priorities, like not securing Ben Arun Drive as a crime scene amid the chaos of civilians trampling the yard, potentially obliterating traces of an accident. When the shift hit in 2021 toward cover-up after a fall, it exposed the damage. Public division spiked, with families questioning the flip, and momentum stalled from preconceived hunches that targeted folks like Bill Spedding without early alibi checks, leading to lawsuits and diverted probes. Unchecked theories breed pitfalls, pulling teams into rabbit holes like the Kendall offender concentration that tangled social webs but yielded no breakthroughs, or aggressive tacks from detectives like Moynihan accusing based on gut without vetting, as with debunked voicemail claims. Internal disruptions amplified it. Jubilin's removal over recordings fracturing leadership, while inquest drags, vacated hearings into 2026, left gaps unfilled, resultless digs finding irrelevant fabric. The probe's whiplash fostered skepticism, tips dried up, and the family's nightmare dragged, biological mother blaming protection failures while fosters faced scrutiny sans charges. The takeaway screams for comprehensive review from day one treat every lead as viable, secure sites immediately, verify timelines fast to avoid memory fades, and balance theories without fixation. NSW protocols evolved post-Tyrrell, applying lessons to cases like Gus Lamont with quicker criminal lenses, but this one shows how bias bleeds turning exhaustive efforts into bedlam. One key note before any verdict: respect the involved, their victims enduring unimaginable loss. Foster parents, presumed innocent, grieve a child vanished under their watch, biological family clings to unanswered pain. Rush judgments label without proof, ignoring the human toll. True crime demands we hold space for doubt, empathy amid facts, until evidence seals it. William's story reminds us investigations serve justice, not haste.